For about 40 years, a trip to Red Lobster actually meant something in America. It was where you went after a graduation, after a first communion, after the promotion that finally came through. For a lot of working families, it was the closest they ever got to a real seafood dinner, and that was the entire point. You slid into the booth, and before you had even opened the menu, a basket of warm cheddar biscuits landed in front of you, the kind you swore you would not fill up on, and then absolutely did. There were the lobster bibs, the Lobster Fest commercials, the endless shrimp that everybody bragged about taking too far. For a few decades, Red Lobster was not a punchline. It was a special occasion that ordinary people could actually afford. And then, almost overnight, those parking lots started going quiet. Here is the part most people get wrong about what happened next. Red Lobster did not go broke because Americans suddenly stopped loving shrimp, and it did not go broke because one all-you-can-eat deal got out of hand. Those are the symptoms everyone remembers. The real cause was signed years earlier, in a boardroom, in a deal that sold the ground out from under almost every restaurant and then handed Red Lobster the bill to rent it back. This is the story of how the biggest seafood chain in the country was quietly taken apart from the inside, and how the people who took it apart walked away just fine. To understand how far it fell, you have to go back to where it started, which is a place with no ocean anywhere near it. In 1968, a restaurateur named Bill Darden opened the first Red Lobster in Lakeland, Florida. Not Miami, not the coast, but inland Florida, in the middle of the state. That was the whole idea that made it work. Darden bet that ordinary Americans who lived nowhere near the sea still wanted affordable seafood, served in a comfortable booth, at a price a regular family could swing on a weeknight. He called it a harbor for seafood lovers, and the bet paid off almost immediately. It paid off so fast that within 2 years the giant food company General Mills bought the whole thing. At that point, Red Lobster was barely 5 restaurants. General Mills had the money and the ambition to turn a good local idea into a national machine, and that is exactly what happened. Through the 1970s and into the 80s, Red Lobster spread across the country at a staggering pace. By 1985, less than 20 years after that single Lakeland location, the chain had crossed 1,000 restaurants. It had become the largest seafood restaurant chain in America, and one of the largest on Earth. This was the golden era. Red Lobster more or less invented the idea of casual seafood dining for the American middle class. It taught a country that mostly ate beef and chicken how to order shrimp scampi and lobster tails without feeling out of place. The cheddar biscuits became a genuine cultural object, the thing people actually drove there for. At its height, the company was pulling in more than $2 billion a year and employing tens of thousands of people across the country. In 1995, General Mills spun its restaurants off into a brand new public company, and they named that company Darden Restaurants, after the same Bill Darden who had started with one room in Lakeland. For a while, it really did look unstoppable. But the thing about being built for one era is that era's end. By the 2000s, the ground under all of casual dining was starting to shift, and Red Lobster sat right on the fault line. The middle-class family dinner out, the exact occasion the whole chain was designed around, was slowly being squeezed from every direction. Fast casual places were faster and cheaper. Grocery stores got better at selling restaurant-quality meals you could finish at home. And the customers Red Lobster had grown up with were getting older, while younger diners were not filling the booths behind them at the same rate. On top of that, Red Lobster was selling the one thing on the menu whose price it could not control. Seafood is a commodity, and shrimp and lobster prices swing hard with the weather, with disease in shrimp farms, with global demand. When your entire identity is affordable seafood and the cost of that seafood spikes, you are caught in a vice. You either raise prices and scare off the value crowd that came for the deal, or you eat the cost and watch your profit margin disappear. Red Lobster spent years stuck in exactly that trap, and the numbers showed it. By the early 2010s, the chain had become a problem for its own parent company. Sales at established restaurants were sliding, quarter after quarter. Wall Street was not patient. Activist investors started circling Darden, demanding it cut the dead weight, and the dead weight, in their eyes, was Red Lobster. The pressure worked. In 2014, Darden made the decision that would set everything else in motion. It put Red Lobster, all of its more than 700 restaurants, up for sale. And the buyer who stepped forward was not another restaurant company. It was a private equity firm. This is where the story stops being about shrimp and starts being about finance. In 2014, the private equity firm Golden Gate Capital bought Red Lobster for around $2.1 billion. On paper, that sounds like a rescue. In practice, here is how the deal was actually paid for, and this is the single most important thing to understand about the entire collapse. Almost at the same moment it bought the chain, Golden Gate turned around and sold off the real estate underneath roughly 500 Red Lobster restaurants to a separate property company, in a deal worth about $1.5 billion. Think about what that means. Red Lobster had owned the land and the buildings under hundreds of its own restaurants. That property was the company's single biggest asset, the thing that made it solid. In one stroke, that land was sold, and the $1.5 billion it raised did not go back into Red Lobster. It went toward financing Golden Gate's purchase of the chain in the first place. So the new owner used Red Lobster's own real estate to help pay for buying Red Lobster, and from that day forward, the chain no longer owned the ground it stood on. It rented it. These were long-term leases, the kind where the tenant covers the property taxes, the insurance, the maintenance, all of it, with rent increases written right into the contract for years to come. Overnight, a company that owned its own home became a tenant paying rent on the land it used to own, forever. That is the wound the whole rest of this story bleeds out of. Every single year after that, Red Lobster had to clear a mountain of rent before it earned a single dollar of profit on locations it once held free and clear. When seafood costs rose, there was no cushion left because the cushion had been sold. The chain was now running just to stand still. If you are finding this autopsy worth your time, the best thing you can do is follow this channel, because here we take apart one fallen American brand at a time, the whole rise and the whole fall, and there are a lot more of them lined up on the table. Now, back to Red Lobster, because the owners were not done yet. Picture got more complicated. In 2016, a giant Thai seafood supplier called Thai Union Group bought a 25% stake in Red Lobster for around $575 million. By 2020, Thai Union had bought out Golden Gate's remaining share and become the chain's biggest owner. And now sit with that for a second. The company that supplied a huge amount of Red Lobster's seafood was also the company that owned Red Lobster. When your supplier is also your landlord by proxy and your boss, the question of who that arrangement really serves gets very blurry, and that blur would come back later in court. Which brings us, finally, to the shrimp. For years, Ultimate Endless Shrimp had been a Red Lobster tradition, a limited-time promotion the chain rolled out for a season and then pulled. In June of 2023, management made a fateful call. They turned Ultimate Endless Shrimp into a permanent, all-day, everyday item at $20 a plate. The marketing worked far too well. Customers showed up in droves and ate, and the chain was selling all-you-can-eat seafood at a price that did not come close to covering what the seafood cost. By the third quarter of 2023, that single decision was a major driver of an operating loss of around $11 million in just 3 months. The Endless Shrimp had become exactly what the headlines would later call it, a deal too popular to survive. But notice the order of events. The sale-leaseback that stripped the company of its real estate came in 2014. The Endless Shrimp disaster came almost a decade later. By the time the shrimp promotion blew up, Red Lobster was already a company running on empty, carrying years of rent on land it had been forced to give up, owned by a supplier with its own interests. The shrimp did not cause the collapse. The shrimp was just the last expensive mistake a company in that position could not afford to make. The end came quickly after that. In early 2024, Thai Union announced it was getting out, walking away from Red Lobster entirely and taking a one-time write-down of around $530 million to do it. Read that for what it is. The owner had decided the chain was worth so little that it would rather absorb a $500 million loss and leave than keep trying to fix it. That is the moment the patient was declared beyond saving. What followed was brutal and fast. In May of 2024, before it had even filed anything, Red Lobster abruptly shut around 93 restaurants across the country. Longtime locations went dark with almost no warning. And then the contents of those restaurants, the booths, the kitchen equipment, the steam tables, the signs, were put up for auction online, piece by piece, for anyone to bid on. If you want a single image of how an American institution dies, it is the inside of a closed Red Lobster being sold off as used equipment to the highest bidder. Days later, Red Lobster filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The filings listed more than 100,000 creditors and debts climbing toward $1 billion. The company that had once spanned more than 1,000 restaurants was down to fewer than 600, and it went to the bankruptcy court asking to walk away from more than 100 of its remaining leases, the very leases that deal in 2014 had locked it into. In the bankruptcy fight, Red Lobster pointed a finger straight at its former owner, alleging that Thai Union had used undue influence over the chain's shrimp buying decisions in ways that hurt the business. The seafood supplier that owned the seafood chain was now being blamed, in court, for helping sink it. So where does that leave Red Lobster today? It did not vanish completely, and that surprises people. In September of 2024, the chain came out the other side of bankruptcy, under brand new ownership, a group backed by the investment firm Fortress Investment Group. A new chief executive came in, a turnaround veteran named Damila Adamolekan, who had previously run P.F. Chang's. The restructured company emerged with around 545 restaurants, still spread across 44 states and into Canada. The cheddar biscuits are still warm, the endless shrimp even came back, at a higher price this time, because the lesson of selling it too cheap was learned the hard way. But the deeper lesson sits underneath all of it, and it is bigger than one seafood chain. Red Lobster was not killed by bad food or by customers who lost interest overnight. It was a profitable, beloved, 60-year-old institution that got bought, stripped of the real estate that made it solid, loaded with rent it could never escape, and then handed off when the math finally caught up. It is a playbook that has hollowed out one familiar American name after another, and Red Lobster is simply the one that happened to have your favorite biscuits in the lobby. The restaurants are still open. The thing that made the company strong is not coming back. So we want to hear from you. What do you remember Red Lobster being, back when it meant something, and do you still go? When did it change for you? The prices, the portions, the feeling walking in, and the big one, the question this whole story really asks. When a company like this falls apart, who do you think is actually to blame? The people who ate too much shrimp, or the people who sold the building? Tell us in the comments, because we read them, and the answer says a lot about which of these stories we tell next.